At this point, should AKALI just be reverted back to her previous state? And that is a legitimate question that I've seen go around now, especially on the coming of her 10.3 nerfs and such like that, especially with the shroud changes where now if she's like CC'd, you can see her in the shroud and target her, and especially after a year where she still seems to be somewhat of a balancing issue. And the reason I also legitimately ask this question is because would that actually be the best way to solve the quote-unquote AKALI problem? And as in the AKALI balance problem, because if you take away the balance issues, would you still consider the AKALI rework a quote-unquote failure of a rework, right? If that's like the one metric where it's a failure, does looking at it from other angles make it still like a better rework, like a successful rework even, if you will? And what I mean by that is just like, well, outside of the balance, does AKALI, is she now played more? Is she more popular? Is she more appealing to more of the player base? Is she, a more outplaying, I guess, mechanical champion? Does she provide more skill expression for the people that want to play the champion? Are there different tools and stuff now in her kit to enable her to do more things, either as a split pusher or as a team fighter, as an assassin, whatever build or way you're trying to play the champion? Does it feel more diverse and things like that? Because all of these could be checkbox yes, and people would still consider it somewhat of a failure of a rework because the balancing nightmare of it all, right? Which is not to say that's a dumb thing to maybe judge it off of. Obviously, Riot personally would probably love if they could get AKALI in that perfect space. But at this point, when I see people say just revert AKALI, two things. One, clarification, do you mean just back to when she was first reworked and it's like super powerful and stuff like that? Because that could be what people mean as well, but most likely it just means reverting her back to her old state. And the issue that might come up there is two things. One, old AKALI was reworked for a reason. That reason might be a bit of a mystery now, maybe shrouded in mystery, if you will. Man, that was a bad joke, I'm sorry. But in all seriousness, if old AKALI was back in current League of Legends, which she hasn't been in for 2 years now, there's a lot of things that have kind of changed. One of the big ones, of course, that's probably changed for a lot of people right now is, of course, Set up in the top lane. In which case, a lot of people are learning the matchup with Set and whatever champions they play in the top lane. And AKALI, of course, can go mid too, but for those that play AKALI in multiple roles, or especially in top lane, one of the issues right now, of course, is learning how to play that champion against Set right now in the top lane. And if suddenly you got old AKALI back, would that matchup, which might be AKALI favored, suddenly not be AKALI favored because the old kit won't be able to match up against Set all that well? Or other champions that are meta in the top lane right now. I know Aatrox is still kicking up there, at least in scrims and stuff for pro play. I don't know about solo queue necessarily all that much, but that's also a legitimate question I want to pass off to you listening to this video right now too, is do you think that would also be hard trying to relearn some of those matchups because some of those champions have gone through several changes as well? Runes like Conquer and stuff are gone now. Spear of Shojin, which was a thing and then wasn't a thing and now it's like gone as well too. There's a couple of different things about the top, even alcoves, right, up in the top and bottom lane are a thing now that might make it that old AKALI might struggle or maybe benefit a bit more with those matchups. I don't really know personally. I'm not anywhere near an expert on AKALI. I just got the KDA skin in a chest, and I really like that skin actually, in the splash art and all that, but I'm really bad at AKALI. And one of the things I will say then, I guess as like a casual player when it comes to AKALI, is one of the things that is good about the rework is how it feels like even if you get bodied on the champion. She's one of those champions where it feels like the ceiling is pretty high now, right? Where you can kind of learn things and get better at the champion, and will take several games, but it doesn't feel like you play the champion in like a few games and you have everything mastered down. There's a lot of things and a lot of tools literally in her kit to be able to kind of explore and do all kinds of different things. Now, granted, that might necessarily be the best of things for balance, but for player experience, as in playing as the champion, that could be good, which is why I asked the question towards the beginning of the video about even if, the balance stuff wasn't a thing, would you still consider it a failure of rework, or would you then consider it more of a success of a rework? Because there are reworks that could be, very successful in terms of being at that 50% win rate, but if they don't feel like the champion players are used to, then kind of what's the point? And that's, of course, again, increase, let's say, popularity of the champion. Obviously, the elephant in the room with that one would be Aatrox, in which case Aatrox to people felt like a different champion. But Aatrox also suddenly appealed to a lot more people after his rework. So then he's kind of like in that weird wild child gray area that we probably won't talk about because I'm not an expert in Aatrox either, so let's just move past that. But what I am saying is, okay, well, how do we relate this to other champions like a Jinx or something like that? Since this is a Jinx channel, and most likely if you're watching this video, it's because you're a Jinx player. So you want to probably know, like, what does this have to do with Jinx? Why am I watching this video? What's the idea you're trying to get towards here? It's kind of like pretend the same thing, right? Pretend Jinx underwent a massive rework. She was suddenly way more popular than she was before, but she was basically like picked and banned all the time in pro play, also in solo queue, right? Like when it comes to pro play, sure, it's fun watching like the wild turtles and the deaths and stuff either pop off on the champion in ways you might not even expect, right? Like when you think of Jinx, you think of a backline champion. Deft is out there like frontline jinxing, knowing the limits of the passive and stuff like that to be able to do some crazy, you know, orb walking and stuff like that. Or watching people steal dragons and Baron with the super mega death rocket. Like, it's all great, but it's also not something we see every single game, right? And granted, even when Jinx tends to be somewhat powerful, she's not necessarily complained about all that much because her weaknesses, people feel on average, are still there. You can still dive her and do a bunch of things against her. Even if she has 20 kills, that won't save her, unless of course she has a composition built around her with maybe a Janna or a Lulu or a Yumi or things like that. Without those, she's just gonna die all the same regardless of how many kills she has. So that might not be like the best example, but I am trying to get you to do is maybe sympathize with what is the quote-unquote, again, AKALI problem. Because if it isn't solvable by just reverting the champion, right? If Jinx, for example, went through this rework, she was a popular champion, all this stuff we just said, right? You might want that reversion just so you can play your champion again. But if the bottom lane got shaken up so hard that old Jinx would also suffer in the bot lane meta, is that the correct answer? And that's not to say that leaving her exactly as is obviously is the correct answer. That's obviously some problems too. And that's some of the problems we're probably seeing with AKALI right now as well, is that you can't just leave her where she is because that's not helping either. What I see as the actual solution then in this scenario is what I call the Kalista solution. Man, I'm really terrible at names too. Don't run with that name. Don't start using the AKALI problem or the Kalista solution as things. But essentially with Kalista's in a bit of a rough spot, and she has been for a while. But back in 2016, they originally made a post where they did want to, when Kalista became more of a priority, rework Kalista and then finally decide on an identity for Kalista. By identity, they meant that they want her to be the Oathsworn, bound to a support, kind of a champion where she could save her support and throw them back in for engage and stuff like that, make the support untargetable, and when they get caught out, she can just like pluck them out and it's all good, right? Or do they want her to really play up the kind of hopping around, throwing spears in people fantasy? Because part of the problem is they can't really buff or nerf Kalista properly because she doesn't have just like one major strength or something like that. She has like several that you have to kind of contest and go through, and you have to nerf all of them or some of them and stuff like that. They did the one change once where she lost attack speed if she wasn't near the person she was Oathsworn with. And on like an ARAM, for example, that's kind of rough because sometimes you don't have somebody you want to throw in. Hey Lux, you want me to throw you into the enemy team? Yeah, well here, have fun, good luck, survive. Right? Like, that's not necessarily always viable. Granted, you know, casual game modes don't necessarily apply to solo queue, of course, and stuff like that. But what I'm getting towards is the solution they have is deciding on that. And they have time still to decide on that. And when they finally get to working on Kalista, they're going to do that to try and solve Kalista's issues. The Kalista problem, basically narrowing down an identity. So looking at Jinx, for example, Jinx kind of has that identity, you know, getting excited, getting crazy, getting, you know, wild and stuff like that. So for her to have a rework to be a problem, the Flame Chompers and probably Zap would have to be such crazy abilities that Jinx suddenly has like 3 different main builds. An AP build for the Flame Chompers, because maybe they're more like skill shots or something like that, and probably more of an ability heavy build with either Trinity Force or Lethality with Zap. Like Lethality Jinx is kind of a thing, but it's a lot less reliable than Crit. The rework would have to have made Zap and Lethality Jinx so viable that it was super crazily good for suddenly there to be like an identity issue instead of being that auto attack crit heavy champion that she is right now, right? That might have to happen with AKALI. So what do you think is AKALI's identity then? Is she an assassin pound for pound? Is she someone that should be able to team fight someone? Is she someone that should win lane? Or is she someone that should lose lane but be a scaling assassin and be able to assassinate people late game? One of the things I sometimes see from people that play AKALI on streams and such is, you know, the ultimate, right? The first part of the ultimate doesn't really feel all that great all the time because you're really just trying to get to that second part of the ultimate. Some people want it to be like an instant cast, use RR, right? Stuff like that, right? They want the healing back on the queue in exchange for some other stuff so they can actually maybe feel nice taking trades in lane and maybe trying to actually bully somebody in lane and things like that. So those are kind of the questions I want to pitch to you guys if you made it this far in the video is, do you think Akali should just be reverted? Do you think that is the actual answer to the Akali problem? And if not, what do you think is the answer to the Akali problem? Because reworking here, maybe what if that's like not the good thing to do? So thank you so much for watching this video. This was probably a bit of a rough video to watch because like I said, I tried to make it relate to Jinx, but I'm basically trying to put this in a broader perspective, especially for people that don't play Akali, that want to maybe understand what's going on right now. And also hopefully so we can get Professor Akali a little bit of help so he can finally play as champion without having to make a done video every so many patches when they just keep hurting his champion over and over. I actually feel bad for him that he has to keep making those videos. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification, the actual subscribe button. But I don't know what video will be next, because life can have a lot of kinks. So until this time, take care. GG, get jinxed. Thank you for watching, and enjoy pizza responsibly.